So which Swiss stereotype do you want to start with? Actually, can we talk about the watchmaker, your relationship to watchmaking?
Yeah, so I guess I can say, I come from a family of watchmakers. So my grand aunts, my grandmother, my great grandmother, they were all working in a watch factory, producing this balance wheel, the Unrest piece. Yeah, so goes some way back, and I've met a lot of them to talk about this film. Yes, so
was that the starting point, the family connection?
I guess somehow. I mean, I think when I studied when I did my film studies in China and in Berlin, I met a lot of people, and we started talking about. I mean, when you become friends with some people, you start to talk where you're from, and we talked about Switzerland. And I mean, I think it was then when I started maybe thinking about what was it that my family was doing and in the past, and just this idea of a watch factory, which was kind of mysterious to me and puzzling, but also interesting. So many things happened there, and I don't know. Then we read some books and started talking to people, and yeah.
At what point did Kropotkin enter the picture for you? It's also interesting how he factors into the film, because you open with a quote, and you see his arrival, and the viewer is almost set up to think that this is going to be like some kind of like a bio, like a biopic of sorts. So you're going to approach this period and this time and these ideas through this figure, and then it doesn't do that at all.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah. I think it was a good, maybe like, can you say alibi? Like an alibi to make a film at all.
Like a pretext?
Yeah, I think it's just, I think his journey somehow, gave the reason to go in, one reason to go into the film, but then the wish was to not concentrate on this idea of a biography or a person, also because I think from an anarchist perspective of the 1870s, it's really questionable if we should give so much attention to single people and minds, like these big names that we have now, like Kropotkin, Bakunin, Emma Goldman, these people. But the wish was to sort of do it more collectively, maybe, and look at the margins, maybe, of that movement or time.
Well, I think that idea kind of plays out in many different ways. In the film, but maybe we can bring Clara in, because I didn't know whether to call you lead actress. Doesn't make sense in the film. Protagonist also doesn't quite. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about like just you also have a watchmaking connection.
I do, yeah.
Also family of watchmakers.
Yeah, I think it was my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother who were working watchmaking family.
And you're not a professional actress?
I'm not.
No, she's. I mean, you work as an architect, so.
Is anybody in the film a professional actor?
Accidentally, but not because they were like old friends of mine. But not really, not at all. No, maybe one or two, but yeah.
Can you talk about the reasoning why?
I think it was really the wish to kind of. I mean, first of all, it was maybe the wish that, like the question about language in the past, if it really exists, and the language of the present, but not to try to make like a historical, meaningful language maybe in the film, but that we've maybe imagined that there must have been like a kind of a random, everyday routine language also in the 1870s, and not everything was very heavy and meaningful. So. And with this idea, I think it was that to invite people with all kinds of backgrounds and lives. Like Clara, she's an architect. There is a truck driver from that region, the shorter of the two policemen, who's also a farmer. There are the watchmakers. There is a rapper from Zurich who's also here tonight. Score. Please stand up. Maybe you can stand up. Yeah. So yeah, he's running the pub in the film. So there is all kinds of people, and I think this idea that because I gave maybe sometimes some text before, but it was kind of quite chaotic, so people didn't really know what would happen. So I think the situation that you come together in the morning, people who are never in a film, you get dressed up in historical costumes, and you just have to sort of reenact a so-called historical situation. I think it was so, interesting to see how people would do that. You know, how they would perform these situations. So I think that was really interesting to kind of have, people. I don't know. Sometimes like when I look around or at myself, I don't feel like people really talk language. It feels more like they're being talked by language, if that makes any sense. So that was really what we were trying to go for, a kind of just language talking through people and inviting their ways of handling their own lives and their language and their mouths. And
do you see any affinities with the methods of Peter Watkins? I mean, reenactment comes up in the film a few times.
Yeah, the commune also.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. I mean, this is so important to if you make any film about, I think any historical film is like every other film, but I think with historical film it's more obvious that it's a choice of information from the past. You cannot recreate the reality of the 1870s. It's impossible. So I think also what Peter Watkins is doing, it's this obvious construction of that a historical film is always a construction, and in that sense, by doing a choice of information, I think it tells more about the present anyhow than about the past. So yeah, Peter Watkins was like helpful to watch.
Clara, I was curious to hear your experience of acting, of being on set, being part of this process that Cyril just described.
So for me, what was really interesting is to become part of Cyril's mindset that he built up. So it was like books, it was quotes, it was movies, it was so many subjects that he would send to all the participants, and to become part of this world of references, and insofar to become part of also his authorship was really interesting. So somehow Cyril split up his authorship into 100 different characters or just persons standing there, and then we would jungle with the sentences, you want to say it or should I, and nobody had his own sentences or her own sentences.
So did you not have a script? Did you have an outline? Did you change the script?
No, I've had quite an exact script, but I think for reasons, because I think I've never done a historical movie before, so-called historical, period piece, and I just suddenly I realized that people will start working soon on this set design and costumes, so everything that is in the script will be worked on, and it's not like a joke. I cannot just say no, you're not gonna need a telegraph station, sorry guys, when they've already built it. So that was I had to be kind of precise maybe, and yes, but I also wanted to say that maybe this kind of so there was not a casting really, so it was what Clara said, it was more an exchange, just meeting people for coffees and exchanging books and kind of create something beyond only the film itself.
Right. I wanted to come back to the idea you said about not wanting to center the film on Kropotkin, and there's this larger idea of decentralization and how that plays out in the formal language of the film, the structure of the film, and maybe more broadly. I mean, I think this is a really interesting example of how a film's political content also shapes the form.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think when you work on such a film and you have family that worked in the watch factories, and you think about somebody like Kropotkin, where you have so much information about his life, but I mean the women in my family, they have no records at all, and even in archives in Switzerland, it's much harder to reconstruct female biographies than male biographies, also of like working class people. So this question, how to where to give attention to, was, I think, very important for this film. Also in the sense of maybe that goes a bit far, but I think the books of Kropotkin are very dear to me. I think they're really great. But I think although he's not in the film that much, I hope that like his kind of ideas are in the film, or that's what we hoped for. So I think in one of my favorite books by him, called Mutual Aid, it's a reaction to Darwin, but he doesn't neglect or deny Darwin. It just says like this decision where you put your attention to. Do you put it on struggle systems or on mutual aid and helping systems? Was really interesting. So I think this idea, what to give you, like where do you give your attention to in a film? And because we couldn't recreate, in the sense of like Kropotkin asked himself, where do you orientate your mind? Where do you focus on? So I think this complexity with women and how to represent them, or like working women in the 19th century. So first of all, I think it's very hard to know anything about anybody at all in the first place. But especially about those people, I felt like, who am I to represent, like to show their biographies or their lives? But I think what was interesting, this idea, what we could do was not reconstruct their biography or whatever psychological stuff you want to call it, but their work, because there are still watchmaking schools in Switzerland, and the people learn how to take apart or build an old watch from the 19th century, and they have to be able to build this Unrest piece. So, and they could use those old machines from that time, like the boutons that you are better than me describing. But yeah, so that was a bit the idea, to kind of go for the work they were doing. And I think that's also what happened when I did the interviews with my family. I think they were trying to tell me what their life was about. I mean, they were only working with these things like all of their life, like 10 hours, 11 hours a day. So yeah, this was the wish, to somehow give attention to the work. And yeah.
So Clara, you studied watchmaking? Or you learned?
I did. I had almost a 1 year, a 1 week. 1 year would be a bit exaggerated. I had a 1 week course with other person that is taking part of the film, and Elio, it's her name, and we had these Zoom calls, and it would get dark slowly outside, so time would pass, and we would like talk about this. She would like explain me everything as quick as she could, somehow a crash course, but then we would go more and more deep into it. And yeah, I had a hard time to get what it's all about, and then suddenly, like through analyzing plans, we got into it. I somehow I could read it, because it's the same tool as I use normally. So yeah. And then we would just sit there and work on historical materials. So I got courses on regular watchmaking, how it's today, and then you sit there and it's totally different, unexpected. So,
Cyril, coming back to what you were just saying, I think the way you shoot labor and process in the film is very different from how you shoot the other scenes. Cinematography.
So we spent just like 3 days only shooting these the micro shots. Yeah, a lot of stuff. Yeah.
But what about the rest of the film, which has a very particular cinematographic language, which I think some of which you I think were already working with in your previous feature. But the idea of again, decentralization, literally decentering human figures in a frame.
Yeah. I think it's sometimes also intuitive decisions, which are, I don't know how to talk about it, but I think this kind of question of like choice of information in any film or with a historical film, I think it was very interesting to us that the images we would try to find in preparing the film, this kind of what is where and why is it there? how to be with an image and trying to organize yourself with it. Maybe that was really the wish, and yeah.
I just want to ask one more question about like just historical research, and I think there are some details in the film that seem completely like wild, like the four ideas of time in one town, and like these trading these like portraits of anarchists. Like, but this is all real, right? This is all.
Yeah, this is all real. I mean, of course, to synchronize time, as we tried maybe to show a little bit in the film, was a very enduring, like, hard process with like telegraphs, like, because like everywhere in the world. So in the western part of Switzerland, the sun is at noon zenith in a different time than in the other part of Switzerland. So it was through telegraph trying to synchronize until that was working out. You had different times, and I think. Mainly it was about like security in the train system, like in the US at that time there were like train crashes because the different states had different time zones or like the different villages. So yeah, it was
All right, I think we can take a audience question or two. Yeah, right there.
Something that I mean, in the beginning when we started working on the film, I think it was really clear that we are not going to make a film about the 1870s, but rather a film about the present with like a detour through the 1870s. And so I think technology right now is so much, I mean, I think one of my main, or maybe like our main question could be about our present is also how we organize like history and whatever that means, history. Because I think this choice of information or how like interpretation of history is so much about organizing the situation of the present and also the political, relations that we have. So I think what's really crazy about the 1870s that you had all these new technologies, and they were shaping the way that like these national states were built, which were as much as imagined as a possible anarchist international organization of societies. So I think how technologies influence how we think this is real, or this is a society, or this is a government, or this is any kind of container that we think we are part of, is kind of crazy right now. That what are we gonna do with it? And but it was crazy in the 1870s too. So yeah. Thank you. I don't know. I think what's like with like anarchism and watchmaking, I think what's interesting is that so it's throughout history. I think now there is an idea that anarchism is like something like chaos or like out of orderly organization. But I think in the beginning it was really like just the intention was to create a new order and very organized, access to things. And but I think what's more for me interesting with like this also the title of the film or this piece that is being built, that the center of the watch or the watchmaking at all is a construction. and we now take it for so real. No, we think that time is really real. We think now this is the time that we are in. And I think like other ingredients of like industrial capitalism, it's just when you go to the beginning, they were so made up and so constructed. And I think it's kind of important maybe to not forget about that.
Yeah, we can come back to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just read Dennis's book, so I
Great
can
book.
tell you all about it. No, I mean, I feel very. I think in his movies, what really is important for me is that that it's also like this obvious, for me, kind of obvious construction of an image. It's not trying to hide in a kind of cinematic way that should seduce you and that you forget where you are, kind of. But it's I think it's this awareness when you are facing a made-up, constructed image that gives you, for me, really different invitation to enter a film. Yeah, so I feel I like it a lot.
Are there any more questions? I think we can squeeze in one more. Yes, right there.
Thank you. I think this has many aspects, so maybe it's also a Swiss thing. I don't know, but I think I think especially Switzerland, it's one of the peaks of capitalization in the world. So there's a lot of capital there and a lot of money. So I think, especially in Switzerland, you live in this super, like we're always, I think, almost executing this sort of capitalist mythology that we have all around us. And I just wonder always how little friction there is, or like how little resistance to it there is in the end, that we just do all these things. And or also I was talking to my family what the relationship was to the factory owner. And they were all telling me how sweet and nice and caretaking this person was, although from my point of view he earned like 70 times more than them per month. It's really amazing. But I think this kind of caring oppression, maybe you could call it, is so efficient, it's so brutal, and for me it's really funny and tragic at the same time. But I think it's just how I maybe experience this kind of stuff. And also, apart from that, I think it was the idea that you have like tales of violence in the film, of assassinations, but that it should not be in the center, because I think what's also interesting in that time, this kind of community building of the anarchist movement, that it was like throughout these images that were sold, or like hacking this kind of existing organization of a nation, of the young nation. And so the trick was being done in not where the so-called revolution would have been taking place, which was also very important. I think this one book by Simone Weil, La Condition ouvrière, when she went, this French philosopher who went to work in a steel factory in late 20s, early 30s of the 20th century, and I think she says something in this book that not the religion is the opium for the people, but the revolution is the opium for the people, which I think is interesting, because revolution has kind of like paradise parallels, and this one day there will be the revolution and everything will be fine. But so I think this idea was to sort of maybe also kind of in a decentralized approach to go to the margins of all these tales that are told, and how people would handle this kind of when they're in that situation.
I think we have to end now, but I want to thank Cyril and Clara for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you all for coming.